Welcome to the June 8, 2010 meeting of the Glendale Redevelopment Agency. Can we have a roll call, please?
Agency members: Draymond.
Here.
Najarian. Montero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chair Friedman.
Here. What's next? Can we have your report, please?
Agenda for the June 8, 2010 regular meeting of the Glendale Redevelopment Agency was posted on Thursday, June 3, 2010 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. I believe next is approval of minutes. Do we have
There are no minutes for this meeting, but there is a card for oral communications, and the same rules that applied to the Housing Authority oral communications will apply to this card. I believe there are two cards.
Thank you. I have two cards. First will be Mike Mohill, followed by Herbert Milano.
Mike Mohill, long-term resident, Glendale. Pardon my attire today. I had to take my computer in. I figured it would only take an hour. Ended up being 3, so I didn't have time to change my clothes. Pardon my appearance. I'm a little casual today.
We're casual. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you. The Alex Theater. Here we go again. Can the city afford truly?
That's on the agenda.
I'm sorry. Am I
You're in
missing
oral
something?
communications now. And
Oh,
then
first. Oh, I'm
this is
sorry.
oral communications.
Okay.
And you have a card in for that, too.
Yes, so I can
switch gears.
Switch gears. Okay, oral communication. Normally it's the other way around, so pardon me. I'm concerned about the Maryland Avenue, the Broadway lofts, the plans that's going on. I was here last week, I believe it was, and I asked about it. What's the status report? And I was told at the time that the chairman was not available, and so the chairman is here today. So can you bring us up to date as to what the plans are? I've discussed in the past, a card club, nightclubs, nothing like the Nokia in downtown Los Angeles, because it's pretty rowdy there. People, they heard about the drinking and so forth by the security people. So what's the latest, if you can tell myself and the public?
On the Broadway lofts or on the entertainment district?
The whole place, the whole thing. Do I sit down now or do I listen?
If you're finished speaking, you can sit down, and
Okay.
we'll do our best, I think, to give you a report. Mr. Lansopane, do you want to give whatever we can give at this point? And the reason I'm asking about what we can give is because of Broadway Lofts being a private development, I'm not sure how much we can tell you about their progress, but do what we can.
As chair, members of the agency, with respect to Broadway Lofts, they're in preparation of their environmental impact report. They have a Stage 1 design approval from the redevelopment agency, so they are further developing that schematic drawing, and they will come back to you once their environmental impact report is complete for a final approval. At that time, you most likely you will consider the environmental impact report, any design, and if the project needs any variances. With respect to the Arts and Entertainment District, we have a progress report, a status report, due to you, I think, in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today. We'll have the activities of redevelopment and the planning department.
Okay. Thank you very much. So 2 weeks from today, we'll hear a more elaborate report, so stand by. Okay. Herbert Milano.
Good afternoon. Redevelopment Agency Chair Friedman, members of the Redevelopment Agency, city staff, my name is Herbert Milano. I'm here to encourage this agency for a periodic exercise in transparency in one issue. That's the issue of the revenues and the performance of the Americana at Brand. First of all, I want to say that I want to thank you, perhaps, in the agency, because I finally got my request, the California Public Records Act request that I made in March. I finally had it fulfilled just a week or so ago. I believe the Redevelopment Agency should be getting these financial reports on a yearly basis soon after the Americana Grant fulfills their obligation with the federal government to submit their 1120, which is the corporate forms that they have to submit 2.5 months after the close of their fiscal year, which happens to be a calendar year. According to the expectations with regard to the Redevelopment Agency's share of the benefits of this development, the financial side, that there are 4 sources of benefits: property tax revenue, sales tax revenue, profit participation, The, let's see, what's the last one? I can't recall it now. It's 4 of them. But for all intents and purposes, the profit participation is going to be non-existent because of the high amount that is expected as to be, the threshold is very high before the redevelopment agency and the city can participate. And if there is a loss, then they all accumulate. And if they don't reach that level, they all accumulate until finally, eventually, there might be some profit participation. You had a report back in November 2008 with regard to the profit participation and the income and revenues from the Americana. But it was a little bit premature because it hasn't been a full year. So 2009 was the first full calendar year for the performance of the Americana. And I would love to see something very straightforward. The revenues that come in for property tax and sales tax minus what the city is paying in terms of the interest on the bond. Simple report, 3 lines. Just to see just on those basic numbers where we are. Now, we've had some changes in the past with regard to participation, with regard to the parking. Because parking originally was not included as far as any type of income participation. But I took a look at these financials and they show a loss. I wonder if anyone in the agency will eventually, validate to see if those losses are really justified. In other words, we participate in the parking, but there's nothing coming because it's a loss. But I think that on at least those 3 figures, property tax, sales tax revenue, minus what the city pays in interest in servicing the bonds. Now, that interest is only on the $48 million. The city, in effect, purchased close to $84 million worth of property. But the bonds were only on the $48 million. And even then, just to provide a cash in, cash out, simple report that I think will give us along the way to say, look, we're benefiting from it in some other way, but at least on these financial terms, let's have some clarity and fulfill the intent of these investments. Very straightforward. I'm not asking for the world, something that should be presented on a periodic basis to say, here's how we invested the taxpayers' money, this was our intent, here's our income or loss. Anyway, I'm trying to promote that type of transparency here. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I know that we did. I remember once receiving some kind of a report on the status of the Americana. Is there a schedule? Do we get that yearly, or how does that work exactly?
You've twice received a sales tax, property tax report looking at all the revenues that flow from the Americana. The financial report, with Mr. Milano reference you just received, this is the first one we received, Phil? Why don't you come up and describe how that works? That's part of our development agreement with the Americana. They have to produce these statements in order for us to track the participation in profit.
Right. There's a project cost that comes and then the revenue. Each year, it is 120 days, I believe. It falls in the end of April, after the end of the calendar, that they present this report to us. Up until, in fact, I don't even think that the final numbers on the project cost are in because we don't have the last bit of work that's signed off on some of the smaller punch item things. But in fact, the report that we do have is pretty comprehensive. We get those every year. That is calculated against a preferred return, which the agency approved in the DDA with the Crusoe affiliated group. And it's a mathematical calculation. We did not anticipate that there would be any participation, certainly in the early years, and as such in our reporting, we called that out to you. But it is something that we track, and in our agreement with them, we said that you would be entitled to this percentage, preferred percentage, and then we would split 50-50 after that. So those come in every April.
I should raise that as a result of that report, there may be issues that we will bring up with Caruso that we may disagree with the way certain revenues or expenses are being handled pursuant to the development agreement. One of those being the revenues on parking and the offset of various costs. Frankly, we disagreed with the way they were being handled, and they've agreed to make an adjustment so that it's being handled the way that we think is more appropriate in keeping with the original development agreement. So the purpose of that report to us is for us to monitor and to see if indeed they're treating expenses that may prevent or forestall our participation in a way that's fair and reasonable and pursuant to our development agreement.
Well, if my colleagues agree, I think there might be a benefit to setting up a sort of a regular yearly update on the financial status of not just the Americana, but other major investments that the redevelopment agency's done around Glendale, so that we can see what we invested, what the return is. And I know with the Americana that the goal wasn't just for the Americana, it was also to reinvigorate the downtown.
Right.
And that, of course, is something that's a lot harder to try to quantify in a report, but to the best that we're able to do that kind of thing. I think that evaluating those projects on a yearly basis is not a bad idea, and if there's support from the rest of the agency, I'd like to formalize that.
Yep. If I can, a place for that would be your annual implementation plan review that you have to prepare and submit. That would be a place to take a look at those projects.
You know, what I might suggest, because that may not happen in the same timing that I think you'd like. What I might ask is that I confer with the finance director, find out when we get our installments of tax increment, and then we have a full number for the year, and we can tell you what that is. Sales tax we can track quarter by quarter.
And what would be interesting and possibly valuable is to also look at certain types of projects. For instance, economic development projects versus real building projects versus other kinds of investments that the agency makes, so that we have a better sense of what's really paying off. And I recognize that probably changes from year to year as economic situations change, but if there's a real trend to where, let's say, our investments, just hypothetically, in job creation is really just doing gangbusters as opposed to our investments in shopping malls, then at least we have that information to change gears or to be able to focus. And that may be something that we need to do more than once a year if we're really going to be able to adjust.
We'll strategize that and come up with something. I will emphasize when we give that report, as I will now, that your main return on that investment from the redevelopment agency is elimination of blight. Mm-hmm. And we have been very successful in our downtown at taking care of that. But we'll look at those and come up with a strategy for you.
Caruso affiliated prepares these reports, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then how do we go about auditing those numbers?
We typically have our economic consultant, Kaiser Marston Associates, look at that. If there are areas where we think something doesn't look right, we do have the ability to audit books, and then it would be a trip down and sit down and go through an audit of those books.
But as a matter of course, to this point, we haven't actually audited the numbers that have been submitted?
No. What we do have is the construction costs, and then going forward, you would have operational costs. And there are rules of thumb in the industry that they seem to track with. And what we know we've required of Caruso affiliated.
So yeah, let's talk about 2009, which is really the full picture. It seems to me, starting with 2009, we have to take an in-depth look at those numbers and how they arrived at them, and you can't just go into a contract with another entity and just accept whatever you're given. There may be norms in the industry, but we have no way of truly telling what's real and what isn't.
Like in all of our agreements, there's a certification that these are true and accurate. We review them. Anything that seems out of the norm or what we've known, we would go and audit.
Okay. And then I have another question. In terms of the property tax, sales tax, the actual profit participation, which is part of the DDA, and then the parking income, that's also part of the overall DDA, is that correct?
Parking income was something that came up very late in the negotiation when Caruso asked for the ability to be able to charge for parking. What we've asked then is that we split profit after net of all costs, and we track those costs, and those are submitted. A report is submitted to us as well, and then we split in that 50-50. The first year, it was a partial year. There was some profit. They were charging a fee every day. If you'll remember, in 2009, for the majority of that year, they were going Monday through Thursday with free parking. They still had certain parking costs that were assigned to that, and the revenue was much less because of the free parking. So that also we track on a year-to-year basis.
What's the current status? Is there still free parking Monday through Thursday?
My ventures down there indicate there is not.
Oh, there is.
The attorneys think we're getting too far into this topic, given it's not on the agenda.
Something came about oral
but-
communications, and when we can come back
I'm under the
with a full
impression
report,
there's
put it
no
on the
longer
agenda,
free parking.
give you the
Just,
opportunity and the
one-
members of the public to chime.
Okay, just one last comment, which is I wanted to thank you for reminding us that the primary purpose of redevelopment is the elimination of blight. It's not necessarily to make money or turn a profit or any of that, although that's nice. So when we do get this report back, I don't know how you quantify or measure the elimination of blight, but whatever way we can do it, or as the industry standard, maybe we can also, as part, not just on the financial side, but get that kind of rundown of how well we've been doing in both of our project areas in terms of eliminating the blight that was originally identified.
That does come with your implementation plan. We do it every 5 years is a plan. There's an update in between every 2.5 years where we do call out all the elements of blight that we've eliminated.
Terrific. Thank you very much. What's next, please?
On the business agenda at 6A is Director of Community Redevelopment and Housing regarding Alex Regional Theater quarterly report from Glendale Arts for the third quarter of fiscal year 2009-2010. At 6A1 is motion to note and file report, and at 6A2 is a motion amending the management agreement between the agency and Glendale Arts.
Thank you. And who are we going to with this?
Elena Babolian.
Good afternoon, Agency Chair Friedman and members of the agency. We come before you today to present the third quarter operations report from the Alex Theater and to present a minor change to the management agreement with the agency. The third quarter, representing the months of January to March, proved to be a difficult period for the Alex Theater from a financial standpoint. The event activity and attendance numbers were low in comparison to last year, which resulted in lower revenues. It's times such as these that the agency's annual funding allows the theater to continue to remain competitive in the region. We all know that the theater is an important cultural asset in our city, specifically to our downtown, and the agency's continued support is fully appreciated by the board. Furthermore, the agency's contribution to several capital improvement projects, such as the forecourt remodel and the sound system upgrade, which are currently ongoing, go a long way into helping the Alex remain a state-of-the-art institution, which helps attract shows and increase attendance and revenues. It's our hope that these projects will conclude as the economy is recovering, which will help better position the theater to attract new shows. Although we're here to report on the third quarter, I'd like to provide a sneak peek into the fourth quarter. The tapings of the nationally known show Last Comic Standing took place in April, and they were a multi-day taping, and that really helped the April financials. So when we come back to you for the fourth quarter, the numbers are promising to look good. And coincidentally, the tapings of the show are airing every Monday night, starting with last night at 8 o'clock on Channel 4, and that'll go through mid-August. So they were taped at the Alex Theater, and they'll be shown nationally. Moving on to the management agreement, we're here to ask for your approval to allow for a minor change with the to the management agreement between Glendale Arts and the agency, and Glendale Arts being the operator of the theater. The change is to bring one of the board committees into compliance with Assembly Bill 1233, which basically revised the California Corporations Code pertaining to nonprofit boards. The change, in short, it affects the Alex Theater Committee, which is charged with overseeing and preserving the operation of the theater. This committee was originally set up to be a standing committee of the full board, and with this change now carries the powers to make decisions without the consent of the full board. The agency staff will still be directly involved in the committee by participating in committee meetings. And just to note, the staff report says there is a Exhibit 2. Unfortunately, the exhibit did not get attached to the staff report, but we have prepared it, and upon your approval today, we'll make the change and get the executive director to execute the amended document. That concludes my reports, and there's no questions.
Any questions? Mr. Draymond.
I'd like to, if possible, since Mr. Mr. McCollum is here, if he could articulate the need, what the need is with regard to the issue of that particular change. In other words, what would be the difficulty in convening a full board or the
Right.
approval of the full board versus not?
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Barry McComb, Executive Director of Glendale Arts. In answer to your question, the Assembly bill that was passed deals with having non-voting members participating on a board. And the way that the original management agreement was drafted to not trigger Glendale Arts being covered by the Brown Act was having city liaisons participate on our board but not be voting members. So under this change in the corporate law, they no longer can sit as a member of the board, and of course if we were to change them to voting members of the full board, then everything that Glendale Arts does becomes Brown Acted. So in consulting with our attorney and consulting with the city attorneys, we decided the best way to address it was to change them to actual liaisons, not members of our board, but liaisons, so they will still participate in our board meetings, but we also had to address the Alex Theater Committee. And the actual change will provide the city with more control over what happens with the Alex Theater. Now that it's no longer a standing committee, but rather a committee that's called for by the management agreement, the city members that serve on that board will carry the same voting rights that the representatives of the Glendale Arts Board does. So between the two entities, they will decide all matters pertaining to the Alex Theater. Our board members from Glendale Arts that sit on the Alex Theater Committee will report back to our bigger board, certainly get their input, but the way that it was structured before is any decision that was made by the Alex Theater Committee had to come back to the Glendale Arts Board for formal approval. So actually, I think for the operation of the theater, it's better because as the owner of the theater, the city now has a more meaningful participation.
Did that answer your question?
It does.
Thank you very much, Mr. McComb. I have one card, Mike Mohill.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, council members. Mike Mohill, long-term resident. Well, here we go again. This is called the Glendale bailout for the Alex Theater. Another quarter. This has been going on for 30 years. You call it Glendale Arts, Arts Glendale. Doesn't matter. It's the same thing, and we still have a loss every quarter. When are we going to make this a private enterprise and turn it over to the Netherlander Corporation or somebody else who can make a profit? Is that unbelievable? You know? Alex Theater lost $10,000 compared to last quarter. How much money did we pay Mr. McComb? Is he on salary? Is he on commission? Is he on salary plus a commission based on performance? I was paid on performance for 27 years. And if I didn't perform, guess what? I didn't have a check at the end of the week. The way this Alex Theater works, you still get a check at the end of the week, even if you don't perform. Let's have a thing called accountability and transparency. Doesn't that sound familiar, those words? How many employees do we have? What kind of salary are we paying these people? Where's some actual documents? This is like the second time I've been here asking for accountability. I hate to use the word white elephant, but this is what this nonprofit is. I love the Alex Theater, but maybe we need private industry to run it, not public. You know, how much longer? I'm a taxpayer. There are a lot of other nonprofits who could use $500,000 a year. Right here. I'm on Social Security. Send it to me. I'm your favorite charity. Every year, every quarter, weather reports. If you worked for the company that I worked for, the whole staff would have been fired 30 years ago and every year thereafter without showing a profit. Mrs. Friedman will say, well, arts don't have to make a profit. Well, you know what? I think they do. This country is going downhill economically. And arts, I love the arts. I subscribe to the arts. I write them a check every month. But how much longer does the Alex Theater has to be on our payroll? Please, let's consider seriously and turning over to a private developer. Let him do the programming, work an arrangement. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Going to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion from the agency? Mr.
As a comment, I know that we've been in a terrible recession, still in it. That's affected every industry, business, person in the United States. The same with theaters. There was a loss in the first quarter, and I believe there was 2 major events that both canceled out in the first quarter. Is that right, Mr. McComb? That's what I saw in the report. 2 major events that were canceled in the first quarter. The third quarter, which would account for some of the losses. That's just the way it is in these times. Nobody's making a whole lot of money. And the Alex Theater is Glendale. It belongs to all the residents of Glendale. I'm not going to ever think about turning it over to a private entity to run. I think Mr. McComb is one of the best in the business. We should be grateful to having him because my 14 years here, he's been the best we've had, turning that theater around and turning it into a profit in many ways, and it's still growing. So I think, Barry, you're doing a great job. Just continue to do it. The economy shall turn someday. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Just housekeeping. We do the 2 motions on one, or they have to be, yes? And I'd like to move 6A, 1 and 2.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay. Do we need a roll call?
Yes. Agency members Draymond,
Yes.
Najarian, Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Chair Friedman.
Yes. What's next, please?
Is there any agency member or staff comments?
Any comments?
Nope.
Seeing none,
Move we adjourn.
Is there a second? Thank you.
you're adjourned. Thank you.